Hi, Dad! Boo! Back from the dead. Not really, but it has been a while. I know that I missed Spooky Scary Month, but I wanted to at least start putting videos out again. So I debated what my return video was going to be. And what's better than spooky stories, and true ones at that? I asked some of my family and friends for their short spooky stories or experiences, and these are a few of what I received. Let's start with my own. Years ago, I used to work with the less fortunate. This included those with intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities, and simply people who fell through the cracks. One of these jobs ended up being working for an unnamed facility for endangered children. It was a lockdown facility for minors who had been involved in everything from human trafficking to drug trafficking to abuse to any and all types of crime. It was a rehabilitation facility. Now, this facility was not new. It used to be a hospital, specifically a hospital used to treat tuberculosis. It stood empty for a long time between its two lives, for obvious reasons. The facility was actually still considered dangerous, the building itself. Residents and staff had to undergo regular tuberculosis screenings, even though the building should have been completely clean. That in and of itself is creepy enough, but it's not the point of the story. When I decided to work for this facility, I told my family, only for my eldest uncle to speak up and say, "Oh, that's where I was treated for tuberculosis when I was a kid. We should have a talk before you start going to work." I didn't normally talk to this uncle. Family issues, not the point. But I did this time. The talk was rather short. We sat down on the phone together, and he described his experience being in the hospital, his treatments, and his friends. Y'all, I thought he was messing with me. He told me, yeah, I saw a lot of kids come and go, but only one came back after he was taken away in a body bag. Oh, really? What was I supposed to say to that? But then he just went on like he hadn't just dropped what should have been a much longer story in my lap. He asked me if I could check his old room and see if his initials were still carved into the wall, and if the Shadow Kid still lived there. Then he hung up on me. He was never a man of many words. Nice, huh? No, that's not the end of the story. So, being the ever-intelligent girl I am, I started working there anyway. I was actually assigned to the boys' ward right away. There were 6 wards, and only one had boys in it. The facility mostly housed trafficking victims, sadly. Coincidentally, my uncle's old room was in the boys' ward. I was able to check it and let him know that, though they had been painted over many times, his initials were still there. End of story. Yeah, I'm a liar. It soon became clear that I was an excellent fit for the boys' ward, so I ended up working there almost every night. The only time I wasn't there was when a particularly violent resident was brought in, and our biggest guys were assigned to guard the doors. It was a couple months in, with no bad incidents, when, let's call him Frank, talked to me for the first time. I worked nights, so I didn't have as much contact with the boys as other people. I came in, and I put them to bed. Frank always went to bed early, so we'd never spoken before. Frank left his room that night, technically allowed, but only for bathroom breaks, and came straight to the office with a very strange request from a teenage boy. He was asking me to turn on the lights in his room. Now, the door was already open. The doors had to stay open for safety reasons, so there was light in the room already, but he wanted the overheads on. When I asked him why, he answered me very matter-of-factly, "I can't sleep because of the Shadow Kid in the corner." Wild guess which room he was in. Yep, that one, my uncle's. I would love to say that it was just the imagination of a traumatized teenage boy, but, well, I had to investigate. First and foremost, I had to make sure that someone wasn't hiding in his room from a different room. The kids sometimes did that. Also, turning a light on was a completely allowable request, but I had to use my tappy thing to do it myself. So I investigated, and there was a shadow kid in the corner. So I tapped the light on, and, oh boy, he was gone. No kid in his room, no mistaken clothes in the corner, no poster mistaken for a person, just an empty corner. Me? My intelligent self? I kept working there, and it wasn't the last experience I had. Alright, let's get on to the shorter stories. This one's from my father. Now, my dad isn't really a big paranormal believer, or one at all, so this encounter threw him off a bit. Let me set the scene first. My parents love to go to flea markets. They will travel for hours to go to different places, but they do have their favorites. Years ago, one of these favorites was a single-story, run-down old flea market building only open on certain days and at certain times. It's hard to describe the atmosphere walking in. Try to imagine your grandmother's house, your father's basement, and your grandfather's garage all exploded in the same place, dust, dirt, cigarette smoke, and all. Yeah, I think that does it. It's the type of place where even the dust particles seem like they could be haunted. Then, for some reason, there's a random fake dinosaur poop toy on the wall. Brand new. This place seemed like an OSHA violation, ready to fall in on itself at any moment. The floorboards creaked, randomly angled in some places. The walls weren't straight, and the ceiling bowed down like the attic was going to crack open at any moment. It was actually really cool. Especially as a kid, running around and looking at all the random things that I didn't know were antiques and vintage items worth far more than my allowance. I never got an allowance. The story of this encounter is rather short. My parents were walking around the flea market, seemingly alone, when my dad came upon some old train parts, toy train parts. He and my mother had become separated, and that's when it happened. There was a sound, then a small hand was suddenly holding his own. This isn't too strange. My dad attracts people like a bug zapper. So he looked down to talk to this child and figure out where their parents were. Still holding this child's hand, he looked down to see nothing. And that was it. My mother found him looking white as a ghost, and they left with nothing, like the intelligent people that they actually are. They didn't go back. Expert advice here. If you are accosted by a ghost at the flea market, don't bring anything home. That's how you avoid bringing the spirit home with you. Not that I have any personal experience with that. The last story for today is courtesy of my mother, and I hope I can do it justice. Setting the scene will be a little difficult because the building I'm talking about is barely recognizable, so I'm going to have to be careful with my words here. It's not that I think they're going to get mad at me, though they might. I don't want thrill seekers trying to go there looking for ghosts and disturbing the residents. This story comes from way back when my mother was working in a nursing home. Now, this nursing home isn't your normal run-of-the-mill medical facility. This nursing home is a renovated Victorian mansion turned into a state-of-the-art medical facility. From the outside, it still looks like a Victorian mansion. Even the two-wing additions that make up the majority of the patient rooms look like they belong to the original building. Really, it's a beautiful place to spend your final days with its own complex story. In order to clock in for work, my mother would have to go into the basement, greet the resident bat, no, I'm not kidding, then punch her time card and head up the elevator to her wing and floor. At the time of this story, she was working in the critical care unit. This unit is made up of one large room with 4 cubicles for patients in need of critical care. These cubicles are separated by curtains, and the only doors are at the ends of the hallway, one leading to a large bathroom and the other leading off the unit. This story takes place during breakfast, a loud, busy, messy time on the unit. My mother is helping, let's call him Gerald, with his breakfast. Gerald is doing amazingly this morning. He's able to sit up on his own, feed himself, talk to my mother, everything. He even explained to her why he didn't have milk, as he put grape juice into his cereal. Spoiler, he didn't like milk. Everything is going well. An incident-free morning, she thought. It was only then that she noticed something seemed off. As Gerald spoke to her, she could hear it too well. In fact, it was all she could hear. There was no sound bleeding in from the outside the cubicle, no residents talking as they had their meals, no nurses rushing down the hallway, no machines beeping incessantly. It was like they were alone, just the two of them, the only people in the world. Then Gerald stopped moving, dead still, eyes wide, hand on his tray, completely still. But his eyes were moving, watching someone or something right behind her. So obviously she wanted to know what was freaking her patient out, right? Too bad she couldn't move. But she could feel it. That pressure and presence you feel when someone is looming over you from behind. Like the feeling of cold claws digging into your shoulders, holding you in place. Stifling and terrifying at the same time. All she could do was watch, staring into her patient's glassy eyes as he watched a figure approach from behind her, eerie silhouette etched into the reflection there. The change was sudden and shocking. Warm fingers turned cold and mottled, skin fading to gray as the light in Gerald's eyes slowly faded away. In a snap, sound returned and my mother could move again. She checked first, feeling for a pulse, before running to get the charge nurse. He was cold to the touch when they returned, as if he had been dead for hours. It was a mystery to them all, and it still remains to this day. Had he been dead the entire morning? Did my mother experience a moment of psychosis? Had she stood in the same room as death? There are some things in life that we will never know. But Gerald never ate his breakfast that morning. Please excuse this writer for being a little prosy at the end there. Habits are hard to break. I hope you enjoyed these true stories. They are just the start of many that I received when I asked for volunteers. Do you have your own creepy story or encounter that you would like to share? I would love to hear them. Maybe even include them in a future video. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.